There's something about masks. When it's the fall, my favorite time of year, pumpkins, sweatshirts, and Halloween. It's fun, right? You get to go out, you get to scare people, all the little kids come around in their little costumes. They're trick or treating, they want your candy. But what if somebody knocked on your door and it was any other time of year? It was not Halloween. They were wearing a mask. It would be terrifying. All of a sudden, this innocent little piece of plastic would take on a horrifying demeanor. All of a sudden, this person behind the mask is anonymous, possibly full of danger, and all of a sudden you would feel completely vulnerable. If you've seen the movie The Strangers, that that would make anybody afraid of masks. Now, the movie The Strangers was not entirely based on a true story. You see, what the writer did was he took the Manson family murders, the Sharon Tate murders, and he combined it with an incident that happened to him when he was a teenager. He was home alone, and a stranger knocked on the door and asked for somebody who didn't live there. And it gave him an uneasy feeling, and rightfully so, because he ended up finding out that this person was actually casing the neighborhood to find somebody who, they could rob. So there's something about that movie, because I love horror movies, like love, love, love them all year round, especially at Halloween, but all year round, I'm a horror junkie. But I can watch them if I'm by myself, if it's something like Friday the 13th or Freddy Krueger, maybe because they have an element of unbelievableness. There's probably not much chance that this long dead person is going to come out of the lake and kill me, right? Like Jason does. So, or this, Freddy, some guy is going to invade my dreams and, he's going to kill me, so I have to stay awake and never fall asleep. They are scary, but they're not very realistic, and that's fine. Something like The Strangers or even The Purge is not something I can watch by myself, because now all of a sudden it's something that potentially could happen. I mean, The Purge maybe, but there's just something about the violence in it that is real. It's something that could really happen. So the whole mask thing, which happens in The Strangers, which happens in The Purge, is terrifying to me. Now back to The Strangers. Was one of the few movies that actually scared the living bejesus out of me. I mean, it really terrified me. And although not based on an entirely true story, I mean, it was kind of like a combo of real things. And the Sharon Tate murders was not completely random, because Charles Manson had been in that house before and was holding a grudge because the record producer that had been renting the house before them was somebody that he thought should give him a record deal, and they didn't, and he was just angry. So sort of it was random, but sort of it wasn't. But there was a story that really did happen that very much reminds me of The Strangers. Now, I don't think these people were wearing masks, but nobody knows, because no person has ever been arrested for this crime. So in 1981, in California, a woman named Glenna Sharp, but she went by Sue. It was like Glenna Sue Sharp. She moved to California after a divorce with her 6 children. And she rented this cabin type house. And this went on to be known as the Keddie murders. So she rented this little cabin. They're called cabins, but I'll put a picture of it at the end of the video. It kind of just looks like a regular house, but I guess they were little cabins, and it was a little resort area. So she rented cabin number 28, and she lived there for a year. And on this particular night in April, her daughter, who was 14, had slept at a friend's house. When she came home the next morning, she walked into a completely horrifying scene. Her mother, her teenage brother, and his friend were all murdered in the living room. In the back bedroom, her two younger brothers and one of their friends who was having a sleepover were left unharmed. And her 12-year-old sister was missing. So the police investigated it, and, they described it as absolutely gruesome. And I hate to even describe it because it's actually so horrible. They had been basically murdered in every human way possible. They had been, slain with a hammer. They had been stabbed. They had been tied up with electrical tape and surgical tape and just like really, really disturbing details. And yet it was believed that this was a completely random crime, which makes it even 20,000 times more terrifying. So the brother and the friend in the living room were actually even bound together, using this electrical wire, which is really sad. The daughter that was missing would not be found for 3 years, and they found only her skull in a different county. So nobody will ever know, what happened or how long she was alive after she was dragged out of the house. When they asked the children in the bedroom, so these children were, the friend that was staying over was 12, the little boy that lived there, one was 11 and one was 6. When they asked them initially about the events of that night, they said they had slept right through it. They didn't hear anything. They weren't even aware that there was a murder. But yet a neighbor said that at around 1:30 in the morning, they heard muffled screams. But because they couldn't figure out where it was coming from or what direction it was coming from, they just went back to bed. So that was the first story that the little boys that were left unharmed gave. Eventually, a long time later, they would recount that a little bit, or at least the oldest one would. And he would say that he did see the mother talking to two men in the house. And he apparently gave a description of them. But the problem with the description was the description would change again. One had a mustache, they had dark hair. At some point, it was said that they may have had blonde hair. And it also went from her talking to this man to the two teenagers. So the brother, who was, I believe, 15, and his friend that were found dead in the living room were fighting with this man. So a lot of weirdness around these boys and their eyewitness accounts or lack of eyewitness accounts. Now it gets a little bit strange because the initial description that they gave, somebody ended up saying that they saw two men that matched that description in a bar the night before the murders, a local bar. Then it was rumored that the little boy that was sleeping over, that his father, so they were neighbors, they lived, right across the street. His father may have been having an affair with the mom that was murdered. And his buddy, his friend, was living with him and may have had ties to organized crime. And that is a little bit relevant because years later, when a new detective decided to reopen this cold case, he discovered that when these murders happened, all of the evidence that was found, so weapons and whatnot, was sent to the organized crime unit and not homicide department. So that's a little bit strange of what people may or may not have really known at the time within the police department, because it was rumored that the sheriff was good friends with the neighbor that lived across the street. And I believe his name was like Martin. I believe his name was Martin. Did I write it down anywhere? Did not. His name was Martin. So it was said that he was very good friends with the sheriff at the time, and that the sheriff told him and his friend that was living with him to get out of town. Now, that may or may not be true, but that was definitely a rumor at the time. And a couple of years after the murders took place, there was a hammer found in a trash of a local convenience store that was believed to have been used in the murders. So, and then there's so many multiple weapons believed to be used, because these people were like slaughtered. They were horribly, beaten to death. So now the wife of Martin, she came forward a long time later and said that she did believe that her husband was the killer, along with his friend, of the Keddie murders, as this case was eventually known as. And she said that her husband was having an affair with Sue, the murdered woman, and that Sue was actually, weirdly, talking to Martin's wife, so Marilyn, Martin's wife, and kind of counseling her to leave her husband. Now, of course, at that time, Marilyn didn't know that Sue was having an affair with her husband. So it's kind of like this triangle. Like, hey, I'm sleeping with your husband, so I'm going to just sit here and tell you you should leave him because he's abusive, he's no good, blah, 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 blah. But in actuality, I'm having an affair with him. So she did come forward and implicate her husband. Now, some people believe that she knew all along that her husband was the murderer, and that she may have been the one that told him to go and kill them. Like, kind of, if you really love me, if you're sorry, go get rid of her type of thing. Now, one reason that a lot of people believe that he may be the killer is because his son, who was sleeping over that night, was unharmed. And so were the boys that were sharing a room with him. So, of course, it would be strange that he would pick that night, right, to go over there and kill her. Now, that could be for one of two reasons. Either A, maybe the mom gave him permission to go over for a sleepover and dad didn't even know at the time that he was sleeping over. Or maybe he thought if his son was sleeping over, nobody would ever think that he was the killer, because who in their right mind would choose to go over there and commit a murder while their son is sleeping over? And it may explain some of the inconsistencies that the boy, the oldest boy, was giving, because maybe dad didn't expect him to wake up, but maybe he did. And if he woke up and realized it was his dad, that could explain why he changed versions of, what the person looked like or what was really going on. Now, some people think that he went over there to just kill Sue. The oldest boy and his friend just happened to be there in the middle of the night. Maybe he thought that they would, that son would be in bed and didn't expect him to be up in the living room. So either he did expect that he was going to kill all of them, and then the plan went wrong when he realized his son was sleeping over, or he intended to kill everyone except his son and whoever was with his son, and then his son could kind of be his alibi, or he only intended to kill the mom, but the other teenagers ended up being up. And as far as the girl that was taken out of the house, well, that's just strange in and of itself too, because did she just wake up and walk into it? Did he not intend to kill her? Maybe because either she was a girl or I don't know. And so they knew they couldn't leave her there because she was a witness, and they just took her with them and then had to figure out what to do, and then ultimately had to kill her. Nobody knows, but all these years later, it is an unsolved murder. So you have all these murdered people, this horrific murder, and it's really strange that if he decided to kill the woman he may or may not have been having an affair with, like if he was the killer, why he did it in such a horrific, brutal way. Surely he could have killed her in a less gruesome way, but maybe he was really pissed. Maybe if she really was, um, meddling and trying to get his wife to leave him, maybe once his wife figured it out and confronted him, maybe he was so fueled with anger that it was like a crime of passion and like an overkill because he was so angry at her, because he wanted his cake and eat it too. Like, yeah, I'm having an affair with you, but like I had no intentions of leaving my wife. So like, why did you start something? And that's if he was even the killer. Like those are just, speculations because nobody's ever been arrested for it. It's an unsolved murder. Yeah, there's a lot of rumors out there. There's even rumors that he had wrote a letter, that this Martin had wrote a letter to his wife basically saying, I killed these four people for your love and then you left me anyway. But I don't know if that's true, because I would say that that would be pretty big evidence, and I don't know why he would have never been arrested. Um, and then there was another rumor that he confessed to it to like a veterans counselor, but I don't know if that was anything either, because again, nobody's ever been arrested. And even if he was tight with the sheriff back then, certainly not with the new investigators and the new sheriff and everybody since. And this case has been reopened, and yet still nobody's ever been convicted of it, so, or even arrested for it. So yes, possibly a horrifying random crime, and just one of those things that gives you nightmares, because it's like everybody's worst fear, right? That knock on the door and it's a stranger and get killed. So yeah, I don't know. I will watch those kind of movies, but I will watch them with people. You will not see me watching a movie that is even remotely based on anything like that alone, because that kind of thing terrifies me. I am the person that, if I'm home alone, all the lights are going on, I'm checking the doors 900 times. Like, no, forget it. Like, I watch and read way too much, true crime and horror stuff to find me sitting there alone and not freaking out. So give me the Freddy Kruegers, give me the Jason Voorhees any day. I'll take my popcorn and I will watch it all by myself, because those are fake enough to be okay for me. The other stuff, little too real for my liking. So I will see you soon. And if you think of another case that is possibly not real well known, but really scary or really interesting, whether it's true crime or paranormal, then let me know. Because if it's something I have not heard of or not read up on, then I definitely want to do so. Okay, bye.